December 20, 1993. And the most famous man on planet Earth ever existed is standing in a room in his own house, completely naked. There are about a dozen police officers around him now, and they have come to his estate, the Neverland, with a court order. And the order says they are allowed to do this to make him take off all his clothes, to take color photographs of his body from every angle possible, front, back, sides, and the most importantly, they are allowed to photograph his private parts. The man is shaking. His doctor is in the room with him. His lawyer is also in the room with him. He is begging them not to do this. He's crying.
They served a search warrant on me which allowed them to view and photograph my penis, my buttocks, my lower torso, thighs, and any other area that they wanted.
But the officers have a job. A 13-year-old boy named Jordan Chandler has told the police apparently that Michael Jackson sexually abused him, and that he can describe what Michael Jackson's private parts look like. He says there are certain marks, certain spots of different color in his private parts, and the police are here to check if the boy is telling the truth.
I am not guilty of these allegations. Don't treat me like a criminal, because I am innocent.
Think about the scene. The man who sang the Billie Jean, the man who taught the entire world the moonwalk, the man whose songs were listened to the most in the world. Your father would have probably called him the moonwalk wala, and that man is standing completely naked in front of dozens of strangers crying while they take photographs of him. The most famous person in the history of the world. These photographs were taken on the 20th of December 1993 and they have never been released to the public. To this day in 2026, there are two sides. The police and the Michael Jackson's defense lawyers still disagree about what the photographs showed actually. The police says the boy's description matched exactly, and the defense lawyers say it did not match at all. But the photographs exist somewhere in a sealed file in the state of California. But to understand how the most famous man on earth ended up standing naked in a room full of strangers, you need to go long back to this frightened little boy in a steel mill town in America, back to a father who beat him with a belt, back to a woman named Diana Ross who became the mother figure he never had, and back to the chimpanzee called Bubbles, the only friend who never asked him for any sort of money, back to a sister who called him a pedophile on television and then took it all back to a record company boss he called the devil, and back to a Pepsi commercial that set his head on fire. Michael Jackson sold 400 million records. His estate has earned $3.5 billion after his death, and he died at the age of 50 alone in a rented bedroom, completely broke, addicted to drugs, with a doctor sitting on his bedroom floor. In his last days, he told his friends that he believed the world hated him. This is a story, the tragic genius of Michael Jackson. For most of us in India, we knew Michael Jackson as the moonwalk guy. Until a few years ago, I did not even know Michael Jackson could actually sing. I thought he was just a great dancer. But that's exactly the point. Even I, as a small girl from a random village in India who grew up thinking Krish was an English film and Hrithik Roshan was an English actor, basically a kid who did not even know the difference between English and Hindi, knew who Michael Jackson was. And of course, he's the most famous person in the history of the world for a reason. But he was also a real boy. Michael Jackson was born on 29th August 1958 in a small town in America, and he was the seventh of 9 children.
Hello out there, my name is Joe Jackson. All these up here is the Jackson family.
The Jackson family lived in a 3-room house. Imagine 3 rooms for 11 people. And his father Joseph, everyone called him Joe, worked at a steel factory. He had once played guitar in a small band, and when he realized that his sons could actually sing, he decided to build a band from them, like building cars from a factory. But Joe Jackson was not a kind father. He was a violent man. In his 1985 book, Michael wrote these exact words. Listen carefully. We would perform for him and he would judge us. If you made a mistake, you got ahead. Sometimes with a belt, sometimes with a switch, and my father was real strict. Then years later, on the Bashir documentary, Michael said this also about his father.
We were terrified of him. Terrified. I can't tell you.
He told everyone that he would sometimes vomit just by saying his own father, that his father had banned him from calling daddy. He was forced to call his own father Joseph.
And he didn't allow us to call him daddy. And I wanted to call him daddy so bad. He said, I'm not daddy, I'm Joseph to you.
By the age of 9, his band, the Jackson 5, had 4 #1 songs in America back to back. No artist in the history of music had ever done that before. But behind those 4 #1s was a child who never got to be a child. See, 1993 on Oprah's show, watched live by 90 million people, Michael said something, and I really want you to hear this in his own voice.
Going to the recording studio, there was a park across the street, and I'd see all the children playing and making noise, and I would cry. It would make me sad that I would have to go and work instead.
This is the boy we are talking about. In 1969, when the little Michael Jackson was just 11-year-old kid, the Jackson 5 signed with the Motown Records, the biggest black music label in America. The boss of the Motown, Berry Gordy, brought the boys to the Los Angeles, and he chose the company's biggest star, a woman named Diana Ross, to introduce them to the world.
When I have the pleasure of introducing a great young star, and when he sings and dances, he lights up the stage. Here he is.
For Indian audiences, just for context, imagine if Lata Mangeshkar herself came down from her own bungalow to introduce a new boy band to the entire country. That is exactly what Diana Ross was. She was the queen, and the little Michael, a scared, anxious 11-year-old kid, had just been taken away from his own mother, fell in love with them. Not in the romantic way, but in kind of a different way. He saw in Diana Ross everything he could never have at home. He saw a kind, gentle, beautiful woman, and he saw someone who hugged him, someone who did not shout at him, someone who, for the first time in his life, treated him like a child.
We have Michael Jackson somewhere out there. Is he out there? Where is he? There he is. That's my child.
So he started copying her. He studied how she moved her hands when she was singing. He copied her hairstyle. That is why the young Michael Jackson had that famous curly afro. In an interview years later, he said this.
I never said this. I always had a crush on her. He did. Yes.
And Diana Ross loved him back. When the Jackson 5 first moved to Los Angeles, she let the little Michael Jackson live in her own house for almost a year.
They were moving from their home into California, so they stayed with me for a while. Michael's very creative.
She became the mother he never had. And here's the part that really breaks the heart. Years later, when Michael Jackson became one of the richest men in the whole world, when he had 3 children of his own, he wrote official will. The will was signed in 2002. In that will, he had to choose who would take care of the children if he died, and his first choice obviously was his real mother, Catherine. But guess who was the second choice? It was Diana Ross. Imagine a singer who was not at all related to his children by any blood. He named her in legal document as the person who would raise his children if his own mother could not. The boy who was terrified of his own father had chosen another woman, a stranger completely to his own children, to be their mother. That tells you everything about the kind of childhood this kid had. In 1979, at the age of 21, Michael released his first solo album, Off the Wall. It sold 20 million copies, but at the Grammys award that year, it won only 1 award.
Off the Wall, Michael Jackson.
It was not even nominated for the biggest award, the Album of the Year. Michael was hurt, very deeply hurt. He told his biographer it can never happen again. And that one promise built the biggest album in the history of music. Thriller in 1982, 70 million copies sold, 8 Grammy Awards in a single night, a record that still stands after 40 years. And then this happened on a TV show called Motown 25. 47 million Americans watched this live, and the next day, Fred Astaire, the greatest dancer in Hollywood history, called Michael on the phone and said,
And he said, "You are incredible, you're a hell of a mover, and you really put them on there." Yes, as he said.
By 1984, Michael Jackson was the most famous human being on earth. He had won 8 Grammys. He was meeting the President of America. He was richer than most of the kings of any small countries. And he was completely, totally alone. He had no friends of his own age. He could not go to a restaurant. He could not walk on a street. He could not sit in a cinema hall without hundreds of fans running towards him. And the only people he saw every single day were his lawyers, his bodyguards, and his record company. So in 1983, Michael did something that only a lonely man with too much money would do. He bought a chimpanzee. The chimp's name was Bubbles. Michael had rescued him from a cancer research laboratory in Texas where animals were kind of being used for experiments. And he paid money to save him. And from that day, Bubbles became Michael Jackson's best friend. And remember, this was not a normal pet relationship. Bubbles slept in Michael's bed. Bubbles ate at his dinner table. He learned even how to use a spoon. Bubbles brushed his teeth. Bubbles wore the matching exact clothes with Michael. And when Michael flew to Japan in 1987, Bubbles flew in the first class with him sitting next to his seat wearing the same outfit. For 4 or 5 years, Bubbles and Michaels were literally inseparable. The most famous human being in the world and his only true friend was a chimpanzee. People laughed at Michael for this. They called him very strange person. They called him Wacko Jacko. Magazines made cartoons, comedy shows made jokes about him. But think about it for a second. From his side, just think about it. Bubbles did not judge him. Bubbles did not want money. Bubbles did not sell his personal stories to newspapers. For a man who had been used by everyone since he was a 5-year-old kid, this little chimpanzee was the only living thing in the world that just loved him for who he is. But Bubbles grew up. See, the thing about chimpanzees is, when they reach about 8 years of age, they become very strong, much stronger than most of the humans, and they become very aggressive also. Bubbles started biting people. He attacked one of Michael Jackson's assistants. So by 2003, the friendship had to end. Bubbles was sent to a special animal sanctuary in Florida. He's still alive today in 2026. He's 43 years old. He paints pictures. He watches TV. He has a roommate, another chimpanzee. But he lives there without his friend. The people who knew Michael closely said, this is when Michael's loneliness became unbearable. He became a man who lost his only true friend, and you have to understand this one thing about Michael Jackson. He could not accept that people he loved would grow up. He wanted everyone around him to stay young forever, just like he had wanted to be. By 1984, Michael Jackson was at the top of the world. And then, on 27 January 1984 in Los Angeles, he was shooting a Pepsi commercial ad. On the 6th take, the fireworks misfired. His hair was full of styling gel and the entire top of his head caught fire. You can see it in this video. He keeps dancing for several seconds because he's a professional person, because his father trained him from the age of 5 to never stop performing, and then he collapses on the stage. He suffered 2nd and 3rd degree burns on his scalp, and Pepsi paid him $1.5 million to settle. He donated every single rupee of it to a burn hospital in Los Angeles, and they named a wing after him, the Michael Jackson Burn Center. But here's the part that nobody understood properly at that time. In 2025, a documentary called Michael Jackson 30 Fatal Seconds came out. In it, the founder of an American media company, a man named Harvey Levin, said this very clearly. Michael was not a drug addict before the Pepsi commercial ad was shot. His own lawyer said the same thing. The Pepsi accident is the one that started his addiction to the painkillers. And this is actually very valid, I'm telling you. Last year, I got my wisdom tooth extracted. They had to do a small kind of surgery, and the doctor prescribed painkillers for 4 to 5 days for me. And they told me to only take it whenever I had pain. But at that time, I was also kind of mentally not okay. So I was depressed and I was struggling to fall asleep. And whenever I took that painkiller, I slept like a baby. So a medicine that was prescribed to me just for 5 days, and I ended up taking it for more than 1.5 months. One day I kind of realized I was getting addicted to this, and I was like, no, I can't be doing this. And that's exactly how addiction starts. And I had to consciously force myself to stop. You're not taking it for the pain anymore, you are taking it to escape your own struggles. Think about what this exactly means. The most famous person on earth had his head set on fire at the age of 25, and the burns were so deep that the front of his cap was permanently damaged, and for the rest of his life he had bald patches that he had to hide with cosmetic tattoos, and he was in chronic pain every single day. And to manage that pain, the doctors put him on opioids and sleeping medicine, and this is the moment in 1984 that burned this young man's head ended 25 years later with him being dead in a rented bedroom. It was all a commercial ad shoot. In 1988, Michael Jackson bought a 2,700-acre estate in California for $19.5 million, and he named it Neverland after the island in Peter Pan where children never grow up. He built a giant amusement park on it, a Ferris wheel, a merry-go-round, 3 small trains, a movie theatre, a zoo where Bubbles lived along with the giraffes and an elephant. For Indian audience, just imagine this. Imagine if Shah Rukh Khan at the peak of his career bought a 2,700 acres of land and turned it into a children's amusement park where he lived alone. And then he started inviting children who are not his relatives, to sleep in his bedroom. In May 1992, Michael's car broke down. It was towed to a garage owned by a man named Dave Schwartz. I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing his name right. So Dave's wife, June, brought her 12-year-old kid to meet the famous singer. The son's name was Jordan Chandler. For the next year, Jordan and his mother and his sister traveled everywhere with Michael Jackson to Las Vegas, Monaco, Paris, Disneyland, and they say they slept in his bedroom. And then in July 1993, Jordan's biological father, a dentist named Ivan Chandler, did something very disturbing. He gave his 13-year-old boy a powerful drug called sodium amytal, and he asked him questions about Michael Jackson. Sodium amytal is now banned from being used in courts because we know that it creates false memories for people. After that drug session, Jordan said Michael had abused him. But there's a recorded phone call here, a tape of Ivan Chandler, the father, saying this to a friend before his son came forward with this claim of abusing.
If I go through with this, I win big time. I will get everything I want, and they will be destroyed forever.
Then 3 weeks later, Ivan Chandler met Michael Jackson at a hotel and demanded $20 million for a film script. And now I want you to connect the dots. The American police raided the Neverland estate, and 4 months later, on 20th December 1993, they came back again. And this is the scene we started the video with. They made Michael Jackson take off all his clothes, they photographed him from every possible angle, and they took pictures of his private parts to check against Jordan Chandler's description of his body. He was 35 years old, the most famous man alive, standing naked crying while strangers photographed him. And then, in the middle of all this humiliation, Michael Jackson was betrayed by his own family. In December 1993, his older sister LaToya Jackson held a press conference in Israel. In front of the whole world's cameras, she said this to the world.
And I will not be a silent collaborator of his crimes against small innocent children.
She said she had seen checks that her own mother, Catherine, had written to the families of the small boys. She said her family had been protecting Michael for years, and this was the biggest knife in his back.
I have seen checks payable to the parents of these children, and I've seen these checks through my mother. She showed me these checks that Michael had written to these children, and it's for a great amount. And I'm not speaking pennies. The sums are very, very large amounts.
Because this is not coming from a stranger, this is coming from his own sister on global television, calling him the worst word any man can be called. And the case was settled. Michael's insurance company paid the Chandler family $22 million. The criminal investigation collapsed because Jordan refused to testify in court. Two grand juries, meaning two separate panels of regular American citizens, reviewed all the evidence they had and both refused to file charges. But there is more to LaToya's story here. 10 years after that press conference, in 2003, LaToya Jackson came back on television and she took every single thing back, every word.
Gordon gave me this piece of paper and he says, read this. He goes, you better say this, you say this.
Jack Gordon forced you to say that your brother was a pedophile. Did you think he was?
No, I did not.
She said her husband at that time, a man named Jack Gordon, had abused her for years. And she said he had beaten her, he had locked her in hotel rooms, he had held a gun to her head, and she said every single word she had spoken at that press conference in 1993, calling her brother a pedophile, was written by Jack Gordon.
It was a very, very abusive situation. I was promised that if I ever left, that I would be killed, and I believed it.
Killed?
Yes, I would be
Jack
killed.
Gordon said this to you.
I don't wish to mention names, Larry. You know better than that.
She said she had nightmares every single night about what she had done to her own brother, and she said she had ruined his life, and she also said she would never forgive herself as long as she lived. Now 16 years later, on 5th November 2009, just 4 months after Michael Jackson died, Ivan Chandler killed himself with a gun in his New Jersey apartment, and his own son Jordan had filed a restraining order against him in 2005 after Ivan attacked Jordan with a 12-pound dumbbell and sprayed mace in his face, and this was the family that started everything. By 2001, Michael Jackson was a 43-year-old man. He had just released a new album called Invincible. It costed him $30 million to make, the most expensive album in history. And it failed, by Michael Jackson standard anyway. But it still sold 8 million copies, which would be a dream for any normal singer. But for the man who had sold 70 million copies of one album, 8 million was a failure. Michael believed it was not a failure. He believed it had been killed deliberately. He believed the boss of the Sony Music, a man named Tommy Mottola, had refused to promote the album. Why would Sony do that? Because Michael Jackson owned half of the Beatles' music. Yes, the Beatles, the greatest band in the British history. In 1985, Michael had bought the rights to 251 Beatles songs for $47.5 million. He had become the owner of Hey Jude, Let It Be, and Yesterday. You know, Paul McCartney, one of the Beatles himself, told the press particularly, I think it is wrong to be someone's friend and then buy the rug they are standing on.
I kind of thought he was joking. I used to work with him and he'd say, I'm going to get your records, you know. I'm going to get your songs. I'm going to buy your songs.
McCartney never spoke to Michael ever again. But owning the Beatles' music made Michael Jackson one of the richest musicians in the whole world. And the theory was Sony wanted that music for themselves. They wanted to drive him into bankruptcy so they could buy it for cheap. And so in July 2002, Michael Jackson did something that shocked the whole America. He went to Harlem, a famous black neighborhood in New York, and to the office of a black civil rights leader named Al Sharpton. And he held a press conference there holding a photograph of Tommy Mottola, the CEO of his own record company, with red devil horns drawn on his head. And he said on camera to the room full of journalists,
Tommy Mottola. Tommy Mottola is the president of the record division. He is a mean, he's a racist, and he's very, very, very devilish.
I'm not kidding, this was massive. This was Michael Jackson, the most famous black artist, the most famous musician to ever walk on this earth, accusing the CEO of his own record company in public of racism. Was he being paranoid or was he actually right? So here's what we know now. After Michael Jackson died, the Sony Music bought his half of the Beatles catalog from his estate for $750 million.
Sony buying out Michael Jackson's stake in music publisher Sony ATV. Now, the company will pay the estate of the late pop singer $750 million in the deal.
The deal was completed on 30th September 2016. So Michael Jackson's theory that Sony wanted the Beatles songs turned out to be exactly right. They wanted it, and after his death, they got it. But it was not just Sony. Michael also believed the American government was hunting for him, specifically a prosecutor named Tom Sneddon, the district attorney of Santa Barbara County, and the same man who had failed to prosecute him in 1993.
Probably all know by now that we've filed formal charges, a felony criminal complaint against Mr. Jackson.
This guy Sneddon was so obsessed with Michael Jackson that Michael literally wrote a song about him in 1995. The song was called the DS. It was about a character named Dom Sheldon, but everyone knew this was about Tom Sneddon. The song ended with a sound of a gunshot. And when journalists asked Sneddon about this particular song, he said,
I have not listened to it. I wouldn't. I just got more important things going on in my life than to listen to a song written by a guy who's everybody calls Jacko Wacko.
This was the man hunting for Michael Jackson. And in 2003, after the Bashir documentary was out, Sneddon finally got his chance. We'll come back to it in a moment, but first, we need to address one more layer. In January 2024, 15 years after Michael Jackson died, American courts unsealed thousands of pages of documents related to a man called Jeffrey Epstein. You may have heard about him. You should heard about him. Epstein was an American billionaire arrested for abusing and trafficking underage girls. He was found dead in his own prison in 2009. When his documents were released, Michael Jackson's name appeared in them. The mention was very small, just one reference in the one document, but all the media went crazy with it.
Jeffrey Epstein's contact list. The Justice Department released files from the case on Thursday. Among the contact list, the famous names included Michael Jackson.
Michael had attended at least one social event where Epstein was also present. Many years ago, there is no proof he was involved in anything illegal with Epstein. There is no proof he ever visited Epstein's private island. But the media is not going to buy that. They want breaking news. Even in death, Michael Jackson's name was being attached to the worst possible stories they can come up with. Now here, was he really a victim, or was he really part of something darker? The records, honestly, they do not give you a clear answer. But this is the world Michael Jackson believed he lived in. A record company that wanted his money so badly, a prosecutor that wanted to put him behind the bars, a media that wanted him to fail no matter what, and a family that's not so happy with his crazy success. You can call this being paranoid or whatever, but a lot of people, this is the reality. In February 2003, a British journalist named Martin Bashir released a documentary called Living with Michael Jackson. He had spent 8 months filming Michael at the Neverland. 38 million Americans watched this documentary on ABC channel, and 15 million people watched it in Britain. It was a worldwide event, and in that documentary, there is one particular scene that destroyed Michael's life kind of forever. A 13-year-old boy with cancer is sitting on a sofa next to Michael, and they're holding hands. And Bashir asked Michael,
"What? But Michael, you're a 44-year-old man now. What do you get out of this? What do you get out of this?
I think what they get from me, I get from them. I've said it many times. My greatest inspiration comes from kids. Every song I write, every dance I do, all the poetry I write is all inspired from that level of innocence, that consciousness of purity. And children have that. I see God in the face of children."
The boy in this video was named Gavin Arvizo, and Tom Sneddon, the prosecutor we just told you about, had been waiting for 10 years exactly for this moment. In November 2003, 70 officers raided Neverland Estate, and Michael Jackson was charged with 14 criminal cases. The trial ran from January to June in 2005, 73 days of testimony, about 140 witnesses, and it was in the end a disaster for prosecution. The boy's mother, Janet Arvizo, was caught lying under oath. She refused to answer questions about a welfare fraud she committed, meaning she was secretly hiding money from the government while also collecting government's help. And she was later convicted for this crime, by the way. And then 3 of the biggest comedians in America took the witness stand: Jay Leno, Chris Tucker, George Lopez. All three of them testified that the Aviso family had tried to take money from them. Chris Tucker literally called the family cunning. He had warned Michael about them already, but Michael apparently ignored him. On 13th June 2005, the jury came back after 73 days, after 140 witnesses, and they voted not guilty on all 14 cases. But the world has already decided. Michael Jackson was now seen forever as the man who was accused of horrible things. Horrible things like abusing children. Not as the man who was innocent, not as the man who was given not guilty by the court. There is a difference, and he knew it. He never returned to the Neverland estate ever again. He started escaping life altogether. He first ran to Bahrain, then to the Ireland, and then to the Las Vegas, and he never recorded another album ever again. By 2009, Michael Jackson was broke. Forensic accountants later told the court that he was carrying a $500 million in debt. He was paying $30 million a year just as interest. He had signed a deal to perform 50 sold-out concerts in London, and he had no choice. He had to perform to pay the debt. And to sleep in the middle of all this, to survive all the rehearsals, he hired a hot doctor named Conrad Murray for $150,000 a month to live in his rented room along with him, to put him to sleep every single night. But Murray was not using normal sleeping pills. He was using propofol, a drug that hospitals use only when they put you under for surgery. And Michael called it his milk. On the morning of 25th June 2009, after Murray had given him a cocktail of sleeping drugs, he finally gave Michael his milk, the propofol, and then Murray left the bedroom to make some personal phone calls, and his phone call records later showed 47 minutes of personal phone calls. When he came back, Michael Jackson was not breathing. The emergency call went out at 12:21 in the afternoon. At 2:26 p.m., Michael Jackson was pronounced dead. He was 50 years old, and the Los Angeles coroner ruled it a homicide. Means he was killed by another person. Conrad Murray, the doctor, was convicted of involuntary manslaughter. He was sentenced to 4 years in prison. He served 23 months. Just 23 months for the death of the most famous person on earth. His public memorial, held at the Staples Center on 7th July 2009, was watched by an estimated 1 billion people worldwide. The company that organized it said that it may be the most watched non-sports broadcast in television history. But the story did not end with his death. In 2019, 10 years later, an HBO documentary called Leaving Neverland came out, and two men named Wade Robson and James Safechuck said on camera that Michael Jackson had abused them when they were children.
Intense sexual abuse.
They gave hours of testimony and 4 hours of film. James Safechuck said in the film that the abuse happened in a room above the Neverland train station between 1988 and 1992. But a British researcher named Mike pulled the actual construction records of the Neverland train station. The train station was approved by the government in September 1993. It was completed in 1994. It did not even exist when Safechuck said the abuse happened. The director of the documentary admitted this flaw on Twitter, and he said that the date must be wrong. Wade Robson, the other accuser, had testified under oath in 1994, and again in 2005. Both times he had said under sworn oath that Michael Jackson never touched him.
Did Michael Jackson ever touch you inappropriately?
No, not at all.
But this is the truth now.
This is the truth. That Michael sexually abused me for 7 years.
His own mother had testified under oath that Wade was with the family on a trip when he claimed that he was staying with Michael. Their case is now going to trial. The date is set for 17th August 2026. The man has been dead for some good 20 years now, and there is going to be a trial on him to see if he was guilty or not. I don't even know if I should laugh about it or actually be sad about it. The estate is worth $1.2 billion. The two men who claim that the Michael Jackson touched him inappropriately are asking for $400 million from the estate. You will have to decide with the evidence in front of you what you want to believe. want to leave you with one last fact. The 2009 autopsy, the official medical examination by the Los Angeles County, confirmed that Michael Jackson had a disease called vitiligo. It is an autoimmune disease. The body's own immune system literally attacks the cells that gives your skin its color. He was not, as so many people worldwide still believe, becoming white because he was ashamed of being black. He was dying from a disease that no doctor in the world could cure. The autopsy found 5 separate patches of vitiligo on his body. They found a tube of medical cream, the FDA-approved treatment for the vitiligo disease. So when he was being mocked on every news channel in the world for trying to become white, he was actually fighting a disease. The same autopsy also found multiple injection wounds on his body, on his neck, on both the arms, on both the ankles, on his right shoulder, and cosmetic tattoos on his eyebrows and on his lips, and a dog tattoo across the front of his scalp to hide the bald patches from the burns from that particular Pepsi commercial from 25 years before he actually died. This is what his body actually looked like at the end. His first wife, Lisa Marie Presley, the daughter of Elvis Presley, said something very important after he died.
He was telling me that he was afraid that he was going to end up like my father.
And he did. Michael Jackson sold 400 million records. His estate has earned $3.5 billion after his death. There's a Broadway musical about him that has earned $319 million. Sony recently paid $600 million just for half of his recorded music. In every way you can measure success, he was the most successful entertainer in the human history. And he died at the age of 50 in a rented bedroom, in debt, in pain. You know what hurts the most? In one of the last private conversations he had with his friend, he actually said this. He said he believed the entire world hated him. Just think about that for a second. The man who literally wrote Heal the World, the man who started a foundation to help the dying children, the man who the Princess Diana, the most loved woman in the whole world, once called the most generous human being she had ever met. The man died believing the world hated him. And maybe the most painful thing is that he was not entirely wrong. Because we did hate him. We made jokes about him again and again. We mocked his skin. We mocked his face. We laughed at his nose. We called him Wacko Jacko in our newspapers, in the comedy shows around the whole world for 30 years. He was a little boy whose father beat him with the belt. He was an 11-year-old kid who fell in love with Diana Ross because nobody at home was kind to him. He was a man who lived with a literal chimpanzee because no human being would ever just let him exist. He was a 25-year-old man whose head caught on fire on a soda commercial ad. He was a 35-year-old man whose own sister called him a pedophile on television. He was a 50-year-old who died because he could not fall asleep. He was a human being. And you know what hurts me the most? That he died literally thinking the world hated him. And that is the real tragedy of Michael Jackson.